Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad 8th generation and see how this particular iPad still holds up in 2025. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind within this particular iPad. Number one, it is a little tiny bit of an older iPad. It came out almost 5 years ago, but that doesn't necessarily mean this is a bad device. There's still a lot of devices that came out back in 2020 that are pretty much still worth it. I think of like the M1 MacBook Pros, I think of some other devices here and there. So let's go and see how this particular iPad holds up in 2025. First things first, if you do want to go through and pick up this particular iPad, links will be down in the description below. You can pick up this one or some other iPads that I would recommend buying this year. You can get them from there for the cheapest prices and help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of this particular iPad, this particular iPad came out in 2020 and you're getting a 10.2-inch Retina IPS LCD panel on it. Now, this particular device, the panel itself, it's not terrible, right? And I do think if you are going to go through and pick up a phone, this thing's panel, it's really not that bad. So you're getting quite a bit of bezel around it, as you can probably imagine. You're getting pretty thick bezels at the top and the bottom. You're getting the fingerprint sensor in the front. And overall, this is a pretty decent type of display, right? It's not like the most perfect display of all time. And it's definitely going to show its age when compared to something like an iPad Pro. It's also just a 60 Hz panel, so it's not really anything higher than that. But that might not be that big of a deal to you. So I feel like if you are going to go through and pick up a device, you might still be okay with buying a device like this when it comes down to it. On the bottom, you're getting a lightning port. You're also still maintaining things like, the aluminum build. You're getting this aluminum back with a single camera setup in the top left. And overall, when I'm looking at this particular device, I think for the most part, Apple did a pretty good job with this particular device. There's not really anything that stands out that's like, oh my goodness, this is the best built iPad of all time. It gets the job done. You do get Apple Pencil 1 support, which is nice, but there are a few things that this iPad is missing out on that a lot of iPads have nowadays. Number one, the design of this iPad is pretty outdated, right? This thing is giving you big bezels. Most iPads nowadays have removed all the bezel, or they have very thin bezels, and they don't have a home button anymore. This thing is still basically giving you that. So that can be kind of a disadvantage for you depending on which way you look at it. So that right there, like I said, can be kind of annoying. On top of that, you're also missing out on a USB Type-C port. Having USB-C is amazing. I love having that. And once again, you're going to be missing out on that on this particular device. So kind of keep that in mind when it comes down to it as well. And on top of that, you're missing out on a 120 Hz display that a lot of iPads have, and bigger and better cameras, center stage on the front camera, things like that. But even then, it's not that big of a deal. I still think this is a pretty decent camera when it comes down to it. This is a pretty decent device. But those are just a few things to keep in mind when it comes down to that side. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to the whole entire price tag side, this iPad doesn't cost what it used to cost anymore. This thing has gone down significantly in the price tag in the used market. So you can buy this thing for probably less than $150, probably closer to $100 as of this point. And that right there is a very good price to pay for an iPad like this. Being able to go through and pick up an iPad like this that's going to be giving you that type of capability is amazing. And that is something that I love to see. So if you're in the market and you're planning on buying an iPad, this thing is a pretty decent price to pay. So that is a very, very important thing to keep in mind there from that particular side. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. Now, on top of that, you're also getting a single camera setup. Let's talk about the cameras. You're getting a single 8 megapixel camera on the back side, and you're getting a 1.2 megapixel camera on the front side. So this particular camera is still holding up, decent for what you'd expect, right? So with this particular iPad on the backside, 1080p at 30 and 720p on the front. To be honest, this is pretty equivalent to an iPhone 6 camera. So with that thought process, you have to keep in mind in the back of your head, if you were, would you use an iPhone 6 camera in 2025? For me, the answer would be absolutely not. But for you, the answer might be different. If you're okay with using it, then that might be a reason why you'd be okay with this particular camera. But for me personally, I don't really think I would be comfortable using an iPad like this in terms of this camera support. I think you're much better off purchasing an iPad that is going to be giving you a better camera. And there are a lot more iPads that will be giving you that type of capability rather than this one. So kind of keep that in mind. I feel like if you are going to go down and pick up a device, this one may not be the first one I'd recommend buying if you're wanting an iPad with a decent camera. So once again, kind of keep that in mind. Not the biggest deal in the world, but that is just one thing you're going to have to kind of think about when you're going through and buying this type of iPad. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there as well. When it comes down to software longevity, this is another very important thing. So with the iPad 8th generation, this iPad is still supported with software. I'm pretty sure its predecessor is also supported with software too. So the iPad 7 is still supported. So this thing, I would say, is probably still going to be getting maybe like one more version of iPad OS. So I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to have. Again, I have no idea. That's like what I'm assuming. So I think there's a pretty high chance with this iPad could end up getting that type of software support. And I think that'd be a really, really nice thing to have. Like being able to go through and get an iPad that's going to be giving you at least one more version of software would be important. But the biggest thing you're going to have to keep in mind here is that with this type of iPad, you are going to be in a situation where it would be kind of nicer to go and get an iPad that would be a little bit, that would give you a longer lasting support. And this one, unfortunately, it's not really going to be lasting for like 4 more or 5 more years. So that is kind of the problem that you're going to run into. And it would be nicer to basically go through and get a device that's going to be giving us a little bit of, better longevity here. And that is kind of what's going to end up happening. Also, battery life. I mean, this thing's battery was really big, 8,827 milliamp battery. That is a really, really big size battery to have inside of a device like this as well. So if you are going to go through and pick up a device, that is a really nice thing to have. And once again, being able to go through and pick up these types of devices, with this type of capability, it is a really nice thing when it comes down to it as well. On top of that, the performance of these iPads is still fairly decent, right? Like it's actually pretty surprising. You're going to be getting the Apple A12 Bionic chip with 3 gigabytes of RAM inside of this iPad. So once again, being able to go through and get a device that is going to be giving you that type of capability is really, really nice. And I love being able to pick up these types of iPads that are going to be able to give us this type of, quality and this type of performance. Because it's not like the best performing iPad anymore. Like it really isn't like crazy amazing, but it is still a really nice performing device. And I do think if you are going to go through and pick up an iPad, it still makes a lot of sense to go through and buy an iPad like this. In some ways, if you want like a very cheap, affordable type of device, then this thing's not terrible. But if you're wanting like a better performing iPad, right, there's probably better options out there. And I will be honest, I think this iPad, for the most part, in a lot of ways, right, it's not a terrible iPad, right? I think this thing still has quality, it still has capability. If you are going to go through and pick up an iPad, this thing's not a terrible option. But I just think there are way better options out there to go and buy rather than like this particular iPad. Meaning there's way better iPads you can buy for the price tag, for the capability, for the quality than this thing, right? I think personally, if you're going to go through and pick up an iPad 9th generation is a really big upgrade coming from this iPad. It's faster, it performs better cameras. That iPad makes a lot more sense to buy. The iPad Pros as well, like you can buy like a 4-year-old iPad Pro, that would be better than this thing, or a 5-year-old iPad Pro, that would be better than this thing. There's a lot of other devices I would recommend first rather than this iPad. Not to say that this is a bad iPad, but there are significantly better options for maybe like $50 to $100 more than this thing. So when it kind of comes down to it, that's kind of how I see this iPad holding up in 2025. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.